take me for a walk under sycamore trees.
Welcome to Twin Peaks Unwrapped. I'm your host, Ben Durant, and beside me is...
Bryon Kazaska.
Hey, Bryon.
Hey, Ben. How you doing today?
I'm doing all right. Well, we're doing another... we're sharing again with everyone another interview from our book, Twin Peaks Unwrapped. I think a lot of people, we've heard good feedback about these interviews. And, you know, we're not going to do all the interviews from our book because you have to go and get it. You got to actually check out our book at bluerosemag.com. We decided to share another interview. This time we are sharing with what interview are we going to share today, Bryon?
Well, this is an interesting one because I don't think I've ever heard his voice, nor have I think I've ever seen his face. Now I have, and it's interesting. He was hiding in Twin Peaks original series. Scott Frost.
Yeah, Scott Frost, Mark Frost's brother, Scott Frost. He did the script for the audio cassette that they had back in the day. He did the autobiography of Dale Cooper. He wrote some of the scripts for Twin Peaks. I mean, he's kind of had his hands all over Twin Peaks, and it's so exciting. And you know, the great thing is to have the brother of the co-creator of Twin Peaks. We might get some insight more about the creation of Twin Peaks because, you know, he's got some insight, I think.
Yeah, totally. We had some golden nuggets, and in our book have a photo that like was something we didn't know about. We discovered that he ended up playing a bit part in Twin Peaks.
Yeah, I mean,
so cool.
I don't think in the 30 years or so, I never knew he was actually in Twin Peaks. So that was news to me.
So here is Scott Frost.
Hello.
Hi, Scott. This is Ben Durant.
Ben, hi. How are you?
Good. And I have my co-author, Bryon, here.
Hi, Scott. How are you?
Hi, Bryon. I'm good.
So we got a little bit of time to talk with you about Twin Peaks?
Sure. From, if you can, pick anything out of the recesses of my aging memory.
I know. I can't believe it's 30 years. It's been 30 years, but...
Yeah, it's a long time ago. Yeah.
Do you remember how you got...
A lot of water under this bridge.
Do you remember how you got involved with Twin Peaks?
It was the first I knew of it was when Mark gave me an early draft of the pilot script to read, which was at that point called...
Northwest Passage?
It was called Northwest Passage, yeah. And, it was kind of interesting, but it didn't seem to be anything incredibly unique at that point. And, and then it just, the ball started rolling and, it turned into one of the great pilots ever made. My wife and I were living in Minnesota at the time. I was a museum guard at that point.
Oh, yeah?
And a screenwriter. And so I was writing scripts, and I had already gotten an agent, and I'd had a couple things optioned. And then Mark, as surprised as anybody else, called up and said, they picked it up.
Mm-hmm.
So, why don't you come out? So that's how I got involved.
The first thing that you might have done would have been the Diane, the Twin Peaks tapes of Agent Cooper there?
It was, yeah.
And do you remember how that was pitched to you? Was that something that Mark pitched to you?
I have no recollection.
Yeah.
I guess it was just the whole concept of, his tapes. Yeah, as I remember, there was very little direction about it, but I'm sure there must have been some. But if what that was, I have really no memory of. I think it may have even won a Grammy.
Yeah, I mean, Conor McLaughlin earned a Grammy nomination for a spoken word performance.
Oh, did it not win? It just was nominated?
I think he was nominated. But, I mean, to just be nominated, that means it's your words that he had to read is pretty impressive.
Yeah, I never got a certificate or anything, though. So, but that's showbiz. What are you going to do?
You definitely figured out Cooper, how he spoke. I mean, right from there, it was like a 45-minute tape. cassette tape where you basically had like minute entries where you talked to Diane, but boy, you seem to figure him out right away. Where he's kissing the ground from when he lands on the airport, and he's observing birds and the moon, but I felt like you really got him.
Yeah, I understood Cooper.
Diane, 10:30 a.m. Back on solid ground. I should say solid asphalt. I'm on my hands and knees in the parking lot of the branch office in Spokane. I'm picking up a bureau car. No, I'm all right. Just thankful to be alive. Looks like I'll be heading out Highway 2 due east. I've got about 2 hours of driving ahead of me that'll include lunch, 1 pit stop, and 2 cups of coffee, unless I refill my thermos. And Diane, for the last 15 miles, I'm supposed to look out for deer on the highway. Man, wouldn't that be something?
So it was kind of a natural for me to do that because I had sort of, I had his voice in my head pretty thoroughly at that point.
Diane, it's 11:55 p.m., approximately 19 hours since the shooting incident, which nearly caused me to make a premature purchase of the proverbial farm. I'm dog-tired. A man can only go so long without submitting to a period of rest.
And I think you would have been like a freelance writer for Lynch Frost Productions. Is that right? Was that what they probably would consider you, or?
Yeah, I was. I actually, for the first season, I worked on the production side.
Oh.
On set as an assistant. What do you call them? Anyway, production assistant.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I didn't know that. What did you do during that first season?
I just sort of absorbed the whole part of production, which came in to be very useful later in my career when I was, on shows as a producer. Yeah, so that was interesting. I mean, you also learn that a lot of writers never learn in Hollywood is how frickin' hard it is to work in production and the insane hours you work.
Yeah.
So that was, was my introduction. I had a few scripts option at that point. I wrote some pretty quirky independent film scripts. Unfortunately, never got made, but sort of got the ball rolling for me. Seeing the production side of it was very helpful on some later shows.
Yeah. And so then in the second season, you became, you started writing. And the first one would have been I'm calling it episode 15, but it would be in between the reveal of who killed Laura Palmer and actually catching Leland Palmer.
It was one of those that really nice. It was a nice threesome of episodes that worked really well together, I think.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I actually think your episode was so good. I actually feel like you could have gone the whole season of Leland kind of. Maybe the viewers knew Leland was the killer, but nobody else knew. And I thought you did. It was a great episode.
I have some very fond memories of that episode. What was her name? Louise Dombrowski doing the flashlight dance on the hook rug.
Oh yeah.
That was
with Ben and Jerry. Ben and Jerry.
Jail.
Yeah.
Yeah, having a flashback in jail, which, as I remember, that wasn't. I hadn't actually written a flashback in the script. I don't think.
Yeah, I think Caleb did.
Caleb Deschanel directed it.
Yeah.
And he's one of the great cinematographers to ever live. And I think he came up with the idea of doing a flashback, but I'm not certain of that. There are lots of things when you look back on, in terms of reveals and the direction the second season took that I would have done it a little differently, but, it wasn't my show. So.
Right. Mm-hmm. I always thought there was a challenge for you because you have the episode before where Cooper is in the roadhouse and something's happening and I guess the murder happens, but he doesn't know it yet, and then you have to figure out how to do that. Because it was interesting to me that Cooper doesn't show up for 10 minutes into your episode. So it's like, I think I was left wondering, like, what is Cooper going to do now that there's been a killing? And yet he comes back and he doesn't even know that there has been a murder yet.
Yeah. Well, in that episode, the one before, I think, wasn't that the one that David directed?
Yes.
It was just one of the more amazing television episodes I've ever seen.
It really is.
I mean, I would just remember watching it with some people, and because I hadn't seen a cut of it till it was broadcast, and I mean, the whole room was just kind of shattered by it. Yeah, I mean, just shaken. It was truly disturbing in a way that you just never see on network television back then. Anyway,
that's true.
Yeah, it was the kind of thing that it would have been really cool if we could have kept that kind of edge going for most of that second season.
Yeah.
But I don't know if the network would have, allowed that.
So in David Lynch's episode, we learned that there's a Leland and there's a Bob, and they kill Maddie. But I feel like your episode got to flesh out that a little bit, and you get to see Leland looking in the mirror, and we'd never seen Bob in the daylight. So it was interesting that you brought Bob out into the daylight and maybe kind of at least helped us understand the dynamics between Leland and Bob.
Yeah, I guess I hadn't thought about it that way, but yeah, that was the first time he had really. Because it had been pretty mysterious up till the episode before that, and then suddenly you have to Leland's in the world, so Bob's got to go with him.
Yeah,
just seemed like a natural to be driving down the road with her stuffed in a golf bag, singing.
Chicks and ducks and geese better scurry when I take you out in the Surrey. When I take you out in the Surrey with the fringe on top. When I take you out in the Surrey. When I take you out in the Surrey with the fringe on top.
Yeah.
It was great. I mean, it was greatly that you added to the script, and then to have Ray Wise perform that, it was just perfect. I mean,
yeah, I think Ray had a good time getting a little musical number in, as I remember.
he lets sing.
I kind of enjoyed that. Because he was pretty freaked out about having white hair to begin with. I think I remember when I don't know if it was either Mark or somebody told him that that's what they wanted to do, and he wasn't thrilled with that idea, but just I think once he realized that, it's going to help me play this, and he was, most actors, when they see an edge to getting a hold of a character, they take it for all it's worth, I think.
Yeah.
That's what they do.
And I wonder, from your perspective, as a writer, did you see Leland as the actual person doing the bad things, or do you take it as Bob being the evil spirit that was doing all the bad deeds?
I think it was both, actually.
Yeah.
I mean, he embodied both of them. In truth, I think to make it real, you had to write it in a way that Bob was the evil that's in all men.
Yes. Yeah.
It's not that he's an actual physical presence. He's that when things go off the rails, he's what's waiting for anybody. Right. It makes it more human.
Yeah, I agree. Because there isn't a few episodes later. Actually, the next one after yours, there's a whole discussion with the men, and they're talking about, is it just the evil that men do?
Seen some strange things, but this is way off the map. I'm having a hard time believing.
Harry, is it easier to believe a man would rape and murder his own daughter? Any more comforting?
No.
An evil that great in this beautiful world. Finally, does it matter what the cause?
Yes, because it's our job to stop it.
Maybe that's all Bob is. The evil that men do. Maybe it doesn't matter what we call it.
I have a geeky question for you, and it's been a long time, but I thought I'd ask you anyways. There was a scene where the one-armed man is in the Great Northern, and he hits a police officer over the head, and then he runs to the window, and the camera then follows him, and then he goes missing. And I guess you can think, did he jump out the window
and turn into an owl?
Well, that's what I'm going to say. This is really far-fetched, but they talk about the owls and spirits, and I always wondered, did he jump out the window, or was he a spirit that turned into an owl or something? Or as a writer, what
was that in my episode?
That was in your episode. That the one-armed man hit over a police officer who was.
I think he went out the window.
Yeah.
That's my vague recollection. But if you wanted, it's all about interpretation. So.
Yeah, totally.
I went on to write a lot of crime novels, and it's I tend to look at that sort of spirit side a little more meat and potato-y, because I think ultimately that's where the real drama is. But those are the kind of things that, it's like, when our man jumped out of hand, I didn't even remember that. Yep.
Right.
So.
And
It's been a long time since I've seen that.
Yeah. And you wrote a second episode. I call it episode 21. And I wondered, by that time, had you already finished writing Dale Cooper autobiography? I imagine you would have finished it before you wrote the second episode.
I think I may have finished before I wrote the first one, because that was one of the more insane writing projects I'd ever had.
Wow.
Because I literally had 30 days to write it.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. It was madness. Yeah. It was just,
That's impressive that you pulled that off in 30 days.
One of those things where you jump out the door of the airplane and, you hope you have a parachute, but you have no idea if you do.
Oh, wow. And how did you end up writing the book? You'd done the tapes, and then they were like, oh, we want to, the Secret Diary of Laura Palmer was a success. There was actually talk, I found a newspaper article that said the next book was going to be The History of Twin Peaks, and it was going to take you up to Laura Palmer's death. And it was going to be written by your brother. And this was in the summer. I found an article during the summer of 1990. Do you know anything about that book? Was that something you could have done, and they changed their mind to the autobiography of...
I never... The only other thing I remember being talked about that was sort of a guidebook to Twin Peaks, which I think they sort of did.
Yeah.
And then... I don't know if did that in a way kind of morph into the book that Mark did
it might have.
A year or two ago. I'm not sure.
And I think Mark would say that.
Yeah, that was never that discussion never came up. I think part of it was that the cassette tape was pretty successful, and it just seemed like such a natural in terms of Cooper to flesh that out more. And I think that was part of it in terms of my involvement, was that I sort of was his voice at that point to some degree.
Definitely.
At least in terms of writing anything in long form. But he also was busy working on scripts, so I wasn't. So I was the last person standing. So
that's something.
But yeah, no, that was a real challenge. It was wild.
I wonder what prepared you for the book. I mean, I know I found newspaper articles where you actually went to Philadelphia, and I think you went to Germantown Friends School, and you were doing research for the book.
Yeah, I sort of made the grand tour. It was kind of ridiculous because it was one of those, Hollywood comes to Philadelphia. I had one of the, I forget what, he was one of the...
I think he had Ken Shear.
Yeah, Ken Shear came with me because he knew Philadelphia, and he was sort of I forgot what his title was at that point. But,
he was a CEO.
There I was walking... Yeah, something like that. So I was, being shipped around in a limousine and going to all these different places. And my main memory is going to get a really terrible Philly cheesesteak sandwich.
Oh.
But I think it was, one of the two places that you had to go to.
Yeah.
I don't remember. I also went to the FBI Academy, that was kind of interesting.
Wow.
Well, we went to the Hoover building first, and got the sort of dime tour by a guy, which was really funny because it turned out that there were a lot of fans of Twin Peaks at the FBI.
Huh.
Oh, nice.
That's awesome.
Yeah, which was really funny because, there was little about Dale's process that had anything to do with reality.
Yeah.
So we went to the Hoover building in D.C., and then we went down and spent the afternoon at the academy and met a couple of behavioral science guys, and generally just got the tour. Went out, shot some weapons on the range, and that kind of stuff.
And I think I heard that you actually outshot one of the instructors there.
I did. Yeah, I was a state-ranked tennis player in high school, and I had very good hand-eye coordination. And although I really had never shot guns at all, but I guess I was kind of a natural. And and then later on in life, I lived in Montana for 8 years and actually did a lot of hunting then. And yeah, I went on a book tour to New Zealand, and one of the events of the book tour was shooting at a gun range at Olympic targets. And by the time I was done, the guys at the who owned the range were ready to sign me up for the national team. It was very funny.
That's something. And so did Mark and David Lynch tell you anything that needed to be in the book? Because you kind of you get to a point where you meet Wyndham Earle, and these are all storylines that are going to feature into the second season.
Yeah, there were a few items that And a couple of them even showed up, I think, after I'd already done a second draft. Mark came up with an idea for, well, we've got to get this in somewhere, so then, I'd have to figure out how to, weave it into his narrative. I had a breakfast with David, probably at Dupar's or someplace, and he sort of went through what he wanted, which, in typical Lynch fashion was, well, I want a thing about asparagus, which is, okay, he's got to do an investigation into asparagus.
Peeing?
Yeah, exactly. So that's the book. Yeah, that was sort of the approach David would take, those sort of quirky things.
Yeah.
And beyond that, I don't really remember when he knew I knew the voice and wasn't too worried about, that I don't think any of them had concerns that, they needed to coach me on how Cooper sounded.
Right. Yeah, you definitely had that.
Yeah.
Do you know if there was any characters that were thought of being brought into the TV show? Like, I mean, I think of like the Cooper's brother or his father.
Well, I think that was one of those things that Mark decided. I think he's an English actor, actually, who's done a lot of stuff for years, and he's older. I think he might have been in, what's the Christmas Carol that George C. Scott was in, and he played Cratchit. Although, anyway, he was in one of the network productions of. And he kind of has a look a little bit like Cooper. You'd recognize him if you saw him. And Mark decided he'd be a great older brother. We got to put him in the book, even though there was no place for a brother yet. So that was one of the things that didn't pan out.
Yeah.
I suppose the Wyndham Earl stuff was really the stuff that had to be weaved in.
True.
As I remember, because that was where much of the story went in that second season.
We've seen the script to the last episode of the second season, and there was a whole thing where Cooper was going to meet his father. What it was, I guess it would have been in the Black Lodge or something like that. But when I saw that script, it's like, oh, I wonder if this was kind of, because of your book that this happened. But I don't know. And this was actually.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was actually your first book you had written. I mean, you've done a bunch of novels, and this actually happened to be your first novel, right?
It was, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. When it was published, we did a little mini book tour out in D.C. and New York, and that was kind of fun because somehow they got hooked up with Ken Shear got us hooked up with a guy who was the chief of staff.
Huh.
And I think it was for Strom Thurmond, who was like the assistant speaker of the House, the whip or something.
Wow.
And this guy, took us on a tour of the Capitol building and through all the offices and the old Senate building, and they had a big party, and he was just a fanatical Twin Peaks fan, which I thought was hilarious given who he worked for. It was a fun book launch. Yeah.
Yeah. You did the tapes with Diane, and Cooper talks to Diane in the show, but some of the fans wondered if Diane was even real.
Yeah.
And you have Diane in the book, and you actually have Diane like having dinner with Cooper. And I've always wondered if there was some kind of sexual thing going on because they're talking about the duck and how delicious the skin is and firm and delicate. And I was like, is there some kind of like hidden message here, or are they just having dinner, or is there something more there to it?
I had forgotten that. So, yes. I have no idea.
All right.
Yeah. I had forgotten that we had brought... I think that was part of the idea was to give Diane a presence which helped to support, this quirky thing that Cooper had going with his little tape recorder, and which could be seen as is this, exactly as you said, is this real, or does Diane exist? Or,
yeah.
And I don't remember I don't think she ever physically appeared. I mean, you guys probably have a better idea of that than I do.
Not until, with Mark working on the new season there, season 3, The Return, they brought in as Laura Dern became Diane, but that was the first time. I mean, it's 25 years later, and they finally bring in Laura Dern to play Diane.
Oh, that's okay. So, yeah, not having seen it, I think I saw one episode of that. I didn't. I missed all of that. So.
I guess we can get to back to episode 21 that you. So the great thing was you had this book, and then when you go to write episode 21, Cooper actually gives his backstory of Caroline and Wyndham Earl. And do you think it was easier to write that episode having already written the book?
Oh, it probably helped, but I think so much of the work of an episode is just getting that structural flow from scene to scene working. The least of my concerns, as I remember, because I just knew the characters, so I never really had a concern about the sort of backstory, making sure all that worked. It was just about making a coherent piece of cinema in a sense. And I was lucky with both of my episodes because that one I remember was directed by Uli Udell, who was a really talented independent filmmaker. Did some pretty interesting films. Wasn't that the one where what's his name gets out of the wheelchair? With
yes,
the axe?
Leo. Leo. Goes,
Leo.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a good moment. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought that whole episode's so strong. I mean, I was rewatching that episode today, and I said, boy, that's such a strong episode. And it, like, some of the other season 2 episodes were very comical, and it was like, sometimes they had balancing issues. But I look at your episode, and you had Leo attacking Shelley, and you had Cooper telling some backstory about him, and then you had some comedy with the mayor wanting to kill Lana because she might have killed her brother or something like that. But it was such a great balance, and it was such a well-made episode.
Oh, good. Yeah, it's been, like I said, so long. Yeah, that was that was my one reservation about season 2 was it got a little goofy places, but at the same time it's really hard to sustain the kind of intensity that really came out in those 3 episodes. With that that arc of the murder of Maddie's death, and the more you work in television, the more you also understood that, it goes back to that idea of when I did the book of, part of, getting to a season is that just jumping out of the plane and hoping you have a parachute on because it's a scramble. Yeah. But I was very pleased with both of those episodes.
Yeah. And one of the storylines that you were involved with for your episode was this Audrey Horne and Bobby Briggs were hanging out with each other. Bobby wanted to make lots of money, and he thought if he hung out with Ben Horne, he'd make money. And I think Audrey was just trying to fix Ben because he was kind of gone crazy. But there looked like there was some chemistry there, and you have dialogue about melting ice and it's meaning Ben's going to melt away. And then Bobby's like, what about Shelley? So he seems like he thinks that she's flirting with him. Did you ever talk about this with the writing team? Were they thinking about hooking up Audrey and Bobby?
Well, I think part of, there was, back then, the camera just ate up Sherilyn Fenn. And she was such a little sex bomb that, you couldn't place any one of those young men in a room with her and not have that be an element.
Yeah.
And I think it was also the dynamic of the thing with Shelley and Leo, and it was just all so complicated. And so, but the more you can complicate anything, generally speaking, as long as you can make it a story work, it's going to be more interesting. So
yeah. And you had the whole Ben Horne Civil War storyline, and I guess we always wondered, is it inspired by Ken Burton's Civil War documentary?
I think absolutely that was, yes.
Especially because it had just come out.
That thing just sort of took the country by the throat and said, watch this, and I don't think any of us were any different. And, it sort of fit into Ben's kind of strange meltdown. Got a little goofy, but, that was part, I think that was part of the inspiration.
So the show had gone on hiatus for a period of time, and I'm going through newspapers, and they were talking about these welcome back parties where, as the show was about to come back, they were having like different cities that would have these gatherings, and you'd have famous people like Russ Tamlin and Eric Del Rey and Ken Shear went to it. And in one newspaper, it said that you went to the Washington, D.C. location. Did you actually end up going to one of those?
No.
Okay, so maybe they
We
thought
had well, no, that maybe it was the big. I think that was in conjunction with the book release.
Oh. Okay.
That was, I think, part of that
makes sense.
was that it was also it coming back.
Yeah.
So it was timed to be, because there was a big party. Now that you mentioned that we went to, I have a vague memory of it. I think maybe a little bit of alcohol may have been consumed that night. But yeah, I would guess that's what it is, because that was the only. I've never been to another Twin Peaks event of any kind, so I'm assuming that's what that was. In fact, I did an interview with is he a sports writer? No, the TV writer for the Washington Post, who was a really good writer, and I had an interview with him about the book and the series. And yeah, I think it was all timed at coming back from hiatus. Now that you've refreshed that.
That makes sense. I feel like it was around March of March of '91, and I do think, now that I think about it, that book was coming out at the same time that the show was coming back. So I guess that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, because we were in. I was up in New York for some other interviews, and it was over Easter holiday, so it would have been around that time.
Yeah, interesting. So here's another obscure thing. Going through newspapers, there was one thing where they were saying that they thought your sister Lindsay might make an appearance in Twin Peaks. Was there ever any thought about having your sister in the show?
Sure, Mark had talked to her about it.
Yeah.
But at that time, she was really busy and working a lot.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming that's why she never was.
Yeah.
I know I made an appearance on camera.
Oh, really? Tell us about this. Tell us about this.
Yeah, I played in the first season, I played one of the, what were they? The Icelanders at a party.
Is that right?
Oh.
That's awesome.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm raising we were short of extras, I think, is ultimately what it was. And I looked fairly Scandinavian, even though, well, I'm sure the Vikings must have rampaged their way through northern England and Scotland. So, that was my brief flirtation, my Hitchcock moment.
I love it. I never knew that. I don't know. I think I've never heard that.
That's
before.
awesome.
That is really cool.
Yeah, you have to look really closely, and it'd be easy to miss me, but and I looked pretty stiff, frankly. Yeah, it wasn't a good performance.
Aww. And of course, your dad was part of Twin Peaks, and he was something else. I mean, I told Mark this too, that my favorite performance was from the deleted scenes of Fire Walk with Me, and he's talking about the rose there, right, and stuff. But he was an amazing actor, and it was wonderful that he got to come back for the show in the new series and stuff. And
since I don't have Showtime, so I didn't see any of the show, because we actually recorded that stuff here at my house via Skype with David.
Oh.
And that was the last work Dad ever did. Beyond, soon after that, he was basically retired anyway.
Yeah.
He just couldn't wait to get out of showbiz. But shortly after that, it just being able to do it again was just not going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
He made an appearance. I mean, there's another Truman. Truman has a brother named Frank Truman, and he did a Skype call, and he was on the show. I mean, there was a whole phone call back and forth, and I think so many fans loved it.
Everybody loved it.
Yeah.
Well, he loved doing it because he was in his core he was a real ham bone, even though he was a sort of shy Vermont kid at another level. But I guess that's why he was an actor also. It gave him an out from that. He was fun afternoon. We were.
It was like almost a whole big family reunion. I mean, I don't know if it was Mark and his son. I mean, I feel like it was a bunch of you there.
Yeah, they had come out. Mark and Travis had come out. Well, they usually come out, every year. And because I live in this little community where Mark and I spent our summers as a kid, and where it goes back to our grandparents. And part of it was sort of the genesis of the original Twin Peaks, and this idea of this, a small town where, you had all these quirky characters. And particularly when we were kids, there were some very quirky characters who lived up here, and there still are. It's up on the Rensselaer Plateau, and which is the 5th largest forested area in New York. And you get back in the woods, and, yep, there's some of those people out there. Yep. And there was a murder back in the 1920s, which I guess has gotten a lot of play lately.
Hazel
of
Drew,
a woman,
yeah.
Hazel Drew.
Yeah, who was found in a pond down the mountain from us, and it's been overblown as the inspiration for Twin Peaks, but it was, I think this place was more of an inspiration for Mark in terms of the kind of bizarre people we would see as kids around here, and there were some real characters.
Yeah, I was reading, I'm going through the newspapers, and Mark once said there was a woman who, 50 times a day she would go to the hose and wash her hands or something, or just weird things that you'd see people doing. And
yeah, no, there's still some real funny characters up here. When my mom was a little girl here, because she grew up here, there was a house just up the road from where she grew up. And, this is a little lake that's a mile long, and there's maybe 50, 60 houses around it at most. And there was a house just up beyond our old house, where she grew up, that was owned by a madam in Troy. And this was where her working girls would come up to get away from the summer heat, and occasionally... some of the gentleman callers would visit, and my mom would tell stories of seeing these fancy cars driving up and going, now who are all these visitors going up there? Yeah,
it's like One-Eyed Jacks or something.
Yeah.
Like One-Eyed Jacks.
Well, yeah, that I think there is some inspiration in a connection to One-Eyed Jacks that way. Yeah.
Is there anything else you want to share about your experience working on Twin Peaks?
I think the fun part of it for everybody, particularly that first season, was just the surprise that it became what it did, because no one was expecting it.
Thank you, Scott Frost, for that interview that you did with us, and for allowing us to share that with all our fans and listeners of the show. And it's so cool. I mean, like you said, Bryon, I've never heard him either. I've never heard him on audio or seeing a video of him, and so this was kind of great to be able to get to hear him and have him share his experience working on Twin Peaks.
It's kind of cool. Now we've had Mark Frost and his brother Scott Frost. I think that's pretty special. We had Jennifer Lynch, and we sort of had David Lynch through the cast. So it's like we're getting all the family members in. It's kind of neat. We're collecting them like Pokemon at this point, which is kind of nice.
But I mean, it is really special to be able to talk with these people, and I hope everyone enjoyed this interview, because I know I really did as a fan myself. It was great to get to talk to Scott. And if you want more interviews like this, we really recommend you check out our book, Twin Peaks Unwrapped, the book. You can get it at bluerosemag.com.
And supplies are very limited. And if you want to send us an email at twinpeaksunwrapped@gmail.com, go right ahead. Give us that 5-star review on iTunes. It does help. Subscribe to us on Spotify, Google Play, iTunes. Follow us on Twitter at Twin Peaks Unwrapped, and like us on Facebook at Twin Peaks Unwrapped. And with all that, we'll be back in a week or two.
See you soon.
This is me, Dale, room 315 at the Great Northern Hotel, signing off.